Thank you, everybody, for watching my next interview today on my show, William Wallace for America. As you guys know, I'm always trying to find unique pieces of information, unique people to deliver that information, because there's more going on in this world than we all want to realize. And there's more things that we just need to be informed about. No matter what side that you're on, I always believe that having more information not only gets you more educated, but helps you figure out how to navigate your own life and things that are going on. With me today in this interview is Darrell Becker, who's the co-owner of Content Safe. Darrell, thank you for being on there. I really appreciate it.
Hey, I'm so psyched to join you.
And not only that, but look, you got a lot of information because of your business. You know, I'm used to bringing on people that are skilled in like just one topic, and we focus on that one topic. Like I just now had John Eastman on my show. We talked about, the legal cases, surrounding the 2020 election. But because of the nature of your business, you cover a lot of content rather, that you're, I would say, an expert or somewhat of an expert on all of it because of that. Is that correct?
Sure. I mean, I love the jack of all trades, master of none thing, but our business, Content Safe, contentsafe.co, what we do is we take shows like yours and a lot of other ones. We like talking big shows, little shows, but the main thing is you want to grow an audience. You want to get in front of more eyes and ears. And big tech does not play good with people who want to say things that are verified with evidence, things like that you could call the truth, for example. If you've looked into weirdness around the 2020 election, for example, or other weird events around Maui, we might touch on that later today. So when you want to put out information that is going to be questioning the mainstream like reality, essentially, like you're looking for consensus reality, you're going to find that big tech is going to censor you. And we're going to, so what we basically do is you're going to find out that putting this video up on BitChute, on Odyssey, on Rumble, on, Brighteon, on band.tv, on a host of other places, certainly archive.org, all the places, interplanetary file systems. Well, we might discuss that one. What our company does is you upload to one place, you got your video and the basically the thumbnail and the description and the title. And now if you wanted to like have your media team uploading to each of the other places I mentioned and more, well, that's going to be a lot of work for them because they're going to hit a roadblock called upload failed,
Yeah.
and that means now you're paying a guy to sit there in front of the computer and do it again and again and again. Or if you're a solopreneur, you're a one-man show, like some of our clients basically, then you're going to just be like, you're going to get frustrated. You're going to find out that you're just not growing an audience because you only have so much time. You want to make killer content. You don't want to be like sitting there uploading videos and finding that it fails. So our company, Content Safe, we get the videos automatically uploaded. You upload it to one place, to us or to whatever your channel is, say like Rumble, for example, or BitChute or Odyssey, wherever it is that you're used to uploading. And those are platforms like right now, we're going to talk about Rumble at some point. Right now, Rumble is not censoring much. They just did a big deal with
They
Russell
just
Brand.
started doing a little bit, though.
Yeah, well, you see, this is the thing. Look at who owns Rumble. And like you could see that this is just like the freedom over there is just a matter of time. That's not going to last forever. But the places like BitChute and Odyssey, and for sure a lot of other places, Brighteon and Bands.tv, that's Alex Jones' platform. There's a lot of platforms that are big, they're growing out there. Why are you not growing your audience there? And the answer is because it takes time for you to upload a video there. Not to mention, well, how many shows do you have, William? How many total?
Oh gosh, it's hard. I mean, and because I was on YouTube for a while, and of course they've, censored me, spanked me, suspended me, put me in YouTube jail. That kind of, I lost some productivity there. I've got I don't know, a couple hundred on Rumble, and I do short ones, I do long ones, and then I've got my podcast with a whole bunch of bunch more episodes. So you asked me the question, and to be quite honest, I don't know the exact number.
Approximately, like just like
there's several hundred.
So to upload several hundred is another thing that we can do at Content Safe. So we grab all of the shows and start putting them up automatically, and That's something that, our technology, we have the ability to do that. You can too. All you have to do is hire a development team and write all the scripting code that we've developed, basically. Or you can hire us, which is much cheaper. And, because that's a lot of work, honestly. So what happens is, you're in front of an audience right there. Say if your shows are all up on Brighteon, on Odyssey, on BitChute, and other platforms like that, or definitely Rumble for sure.
It's funny you're saying this because the reason why I'm not on all those platforms is because I know how much time it takes. I mean, like literally, people say, why aren't you on, BitChute, or why aren't you on this? And I'll say, because I don't have the time to focus on 20 platforms. I have the time to focus on, a couple. And so
Yep.
I'll just work on those couple. And to your point, like I'm on Mike Lindell's Frank speech, so sometimes I'll be loading up something and, upload fail or whatever the case may be, or I'll press it. So I completely understand that. So now I'm beginning to understand not only what you do, but why you are so well versed in so many different platforms or so many different topics. Because one, I'm sure it's where you are and where you, from our conversation, but it's also where you have to be for your company, because you probably have a lot of people come to you that are being deplatformed for their content, or they're sharing what they're being knocked off their platforms for. So is that kind of why you have so much information on that?
Yeah, I've been a consumer of the alt media for many years. I'd say I started tapping into alt media stuff right around, I'm going to take a guess, around 2002 maybe. And that's where I started like having, the ability, like the internet was very young, 2002. I'm sure you must
Right.
remember, like things were not really flowing as much. And I was in Vermont at that time, so I didn't have high speed. It was one of those AOL discs you load in and
Right.
sort of get a 1,000 hours of internet, and then I'd have to drive to town to like go ahead and use someone's Wi-Fi and someone's faster internet to download a show. Then I moved to Hawaii. Then I had access to the Corbett Report, and I started learning about real history, forensic history. I started having access to the work of Richard Grove, where you can now see his prolific work on Grand Theft World. Grand Theft World show, Grand Theft World podcast is huge. I mean, he covers real deal history and real deal what's going on in the news through the lens of what the ruling class have revealed.
Right.
And there's a lot of different pieces and parts that have been moving over this time. So it's been my job to cover all of that. And then, of course, at the same time, I've been in holistic healthcare and medicine for 25 years now. So I had a long time to sort of put together evidence and looking at finding out where I got it right. And very importantly, like in 2020, where did I get it wrong with evidence?
So
Because I made a lot of
not only you a
assumptions.
consumer of the information, you're
Yeah.
also a practicer of the information, but also more importantly, you're a platform for other people who are influencers and practicers to help them get their information out of there. So you not only have to be well versed in it, you've got to be well practiced in it for your own business. So people who are listening to this podcast are going to be able to know that your information is not coming from a jack of all trades and a master of none, but a master of many, to be able to help other people who are those jack of all trades. Is that correct?
Sure, that's good enough. I mean, the whole thing of labels and, like labeling is disabling Jack or master.
Yeah.
I think for sure calling myself a master is not a great humility flex,
Oh
right?
no, I'm not calling you master. I'm using the analogy that people are familiar with to help understand that you're going to be somebody who's be well articulated and well informed as to be able to pass that information on to people in our show today. So
Yes, yeah, I'm here. That's my job. My job is to isolate what would be important for the viewers of your audience to know, and that's what I'm going to touch on. So it is
and
really important.
we can blend in your company as a way to help get that information out there. But before we get started on that, I'd like to ask everybody who's on my show one big question. Actually, it's a couple questions. Is three parts. Is where do you think that freedom is under attack in America, or where, more importantly, where are we losing freedom in America?
I think where freedom is lost and has been losing in America since, I don't know, right around I don't say 1890 to the present has been where parents did not schedule the time, the money, the mental and emotional resources to take care of their own children, because it actually takes 300 hours for a standard average-minded child to learn basic reading and writing and basic numbers, basic arithmetic. That's all it takes, 300 hours. But do you know how long it takes in this
300 hours a
so-called
year, 300 hours a year, or
300 hours
total?
period to learn basic reading, writing, and basic numbers in terms of what you need to go out there and figure out if you got the right change, or write your basically your curriculum vitae, your resume, whatever it is, to literally like to communicate with whatever electronic devices, to write an email. You need 300 hours, and that's if you're average. If you're smarter, you can go a little less hours. Okay, but how long is the standard American so-called public education or any private education? It's 15,000 hours. And what happens in those hours? Lots of indoctrination. It's the number one, like what you asked for is like, what's the big damage right now? Parents are assuming that they, first of all, that they don't have the chops to help their child with those 300 hours. Not to mention, they don't understand that a child can literally teach themselves with modern applications. There's tons of resources. This is why there was a huge growth of homeschooling thanks to the pandemic whole thing, what I call World War COVID. There was, a lot of growth where parents saw what was going on Zoom during classes, and they pulled their children out and they decided, you know what, these children can get a better education elsewhere. And a bunch of them realized, guess what? Children can literally teach themselves, and they do around the world. All they need is access to resources. So the number one threat to freedom has been parents not scheduling time and money and all the resources needed, the mental and emotional skills to be around their child, just to let them literally learn and jumpstart. Because what happened, for thousands of years is that somewhere between age 12 and 18, a child becomes a man or woman. Basically, that's what would happen. They would apprentice with someone. They would literally start or begin starting their own business. They would be making money. They would be literally getting married around age 15, 16, and holding off on children till around 18, 19 or so, approximately. And this was common around the world and still is common in less industrialized places. So the threat to freedom has been people not realizing that they're sticking their children into an artificially prolonged childhood, as I was basically, and then promoting them really, really destructive behaviors, mentally and emotionally, financially, and that's the attack basically. Parents are just assuming, well, I have to put my child somewhere because guess what? You took a job where you can't bring your little baby. Well, that was you choosing to do that, And you chose to get a job where you can't bring your child. That was you choosing to do that. But that's a lot of responsibility, William. That's a lot to ask. Guess what? 2020 hindsight, think about it. And so this is what is the big damage right now. And my friend Brett Venat had a show, the School Sucks Project, schoolsuckspodcast.com and schoolsucksproject.com. It was covering the entire problems of this so-called education system. It's really an indoctrination schooling system that has nothing to do with education. So that's my answer to your question.
Oh no, I'm loving this. And the only reason I'm interrupting you is because you're saying two things that are parallel that I've said on my show before, and a guest of mine said last week. When I asked a guest last week, where are we losing freedom in America? He says, William, we've never had it. And he goes back to the Declaration of Independence and how we were still under the thumb of England for so long afterwards, economically, and the Federal Reserve, and he brought that all the way up to now. Your answer started 1890, our public school system basically around that time frame. And so not yours, I take it, right?
No, it's not yours either, because if you own a thing, you have control over a thing, then you could say then it's partly yours. Or in this case, if we both have part of it, like this is our show right now. No. Technically, this is your show. I'm a guest here. So you own this show. This is your show. Our episode, we are both on this episode.
I got you. So the education system is not ours, it's theirs, right?
Yeah, and the same with the government too. It is, if you control it, it's yours or ours. Okay. You don't have tax dollars, tax money. That was taken from you and me. They have it and they spend it. And those
And,
people benefit from it.
and even more importantly, all they're doing right now is printing it, borrowing it, and making us and our grandchildren be the debtors of that debt that they're printing the money on and spending without our permission.
Right. But, for all the problems that I could easily expound upon and pointing out in terms of the problems of the United States of America and its history of like lacking certain freedoms, the reality is, having spent some time with world travel, this is still the place with the first, second, and third and fourth amendment traditions, where as a bubble around people, like laws exist in people's mind around the people who enforce them, right?
Right.
So if you have people who believe that you have the freedom to say and write whatever you want, you have the freedom to have whatever type of defensive weaponry on your person, as long as you're not brandishing or, well, not brandishing, I'm sorry to say, muzzle sweeping someone.
Right.
Actually, that's a real threat, because that's dangerous.
Right.
Then, as long as you're staying within that area, like, you can always say, hey, you know what? Guess what? I'm invoking whichever amendment, and if people believe that you have that freedom, you have it. But there's a lot of places where you don't have that tradition. So this is huge, and like the
Right.
tradition of freedom to do what you want. And so when you asked, we were talking before the show about left and right, and I was saying, hey, I might be a little bit more right than you ever experienced before, because here's the deal. For me, it's not left and right, politically speaking, and we'll go into what politics is and what a polity is, right? But it's really about the spectrum of authoritarian versus choice and freedom respecting, which people call libertarian. So I'm all the way over on the side of don't hurt people, don't take their stuff, and that's it. I don't need any other rules. Okay, as all I just need to designate who owns what, and I have no conflict with anyone, right?
Right.
But the thing about people on the left is that they're still very authoritarian, and they just want to say, well, if I could just give up my choice and freedom for just a little bit more promised security, I could then maybe, give the consent for a ruling class to put their thumb down on people who do things that I don't want them to do. And that
Right.
was very popular, some 45 years ago, when the right was, very much also authoritarian and wanted to stop people from having certain rock lyrics, or wanted to stop people from, there was a satanic panic at that time, people to worship whatever they wanted to.
Right.
There was that thing. Now, of course, it's flipped the other way, where the left, like those people, want to stop people from having medical freedom, or choosing where whatever they want to do, or what if, like, choosing if they want to,
Right.
say, rent out their extra house or their extra room.
Right.
They want to stop people from doing whatever they want with their property. And they actually have a problem with, like, people owning too much property, and want to stop that too. And there is no equality in property and attributes, because there will always be inequality. That's what this world
Always.
is all about,
It's
so.
almost like the inequality of our world helps the prosperity for everybody. Everybody says, that rising water, we raise the standards. Rising water raises all ships. It's almost like inequality across the board raises everybody's standards. Because there's going to be people who succeed and excel, and they're going to create a little bit better of a world for those that are just kind of comfortable in the middle. And there's some people that are okay with not succeeding. So, they're okay kind of being right there at the bottom, maybe where they are. Maybe they're not. But if it weren't for that success, and, and the capitalism and the free markets, the whole world wouldn't have all the great things that we have today. Before I forget, the second thing that I want to bring up that you reminded me of was about how our education system, the Department of Education in the United States, or the federal government, is using the Department of Education, going back to education here, they're using that to pierce that 10th Amendment veil of our Constitution, where our states had sovereignty because of the 10th Amendment. The federal government uses the Department of Education, not our Department of Education, as you said before, but it says, okay, we're going to have these little criteria that we want taught in our schools, and they tell the states, hey, if you teach this criteria, we're going to give you an extra $500 million or an extra $1 billion, to your state for education. But you got to teach, you got to put this in your curriculum. And as a result, they are able to pierce that 10th Amendment veil in a way where states have actually lost rights. That's one example of probably thousands out there, how the different departments do that with money. But you just reminded me of that. That's something I haven't mentioned on my show in a while, according to the Department of Education. So what about medical freedom? Let's talk about medical freedom for a minute.
Wonderful. So luckily, there are a lot of people who are watching and listening right now who agree that they want to own their own body, and that's a given, and that therefore that they could choose. They're the ones who choose what goes into the body, what goes onto their body. And that's medical freedom in a nutshell. You get to choose. I think the problem often happens is that most people don't consider weighty medical topics or subjects until they're in an emergency situation, and now they're being driven by fear. Because once you're in an emergency, now you're driven by fear decisions. And that means, like whoever can just loudly and most, extravagantly promote a fear narrative, as was happened in World War COVID. There was a lot of people trying to push that you needed to get this swab pushed up your nose. Guess what? I've tested these swabs here in my clinic, and I've seen other people test them with microscopy. Those are toxic. They are dangerous. But that's not all. I mean, so no matter how many of those swabs you've had up your nose, those are dangerous, right? So that was one of the purposes of them, because the PCR test, these polymerase chain reaction test, as the inventor, Carrie Mullis, would have told you, that's not the purpose of polymerase chain reaction technology. The purpose was to replicate genetic material, to find out if the hair in this brush matches the bones in that grave, so that now you can identify your long lost uncle or something like that, or someone who was missing. That was the purpose of the technology, but it was not to actually verify a viral infection or any type of infection. So the real deal is that this kind of thing, this is not new. This happened also during the whole AIDS hoax that was going on in the 80s, basically. And if you didn't study medical history and medical freedom, you might just believe that you were given the real deal, just like Mark Twain would have told you, basically. He would have said, it's easier to fool a man than convince him he's been fooled. So right. I certainly have members in my family who would rather die than acknowledging error, that they, as my dad would say, someone would talk. And I'd be like, hey, lots of them did. And some of them were even silenced, permanently, like killed, basically. So the real aspects of exercising medical freedom, like any muscle, like humility, acknowledging error, it only works like a muscle, meaning like if you use it, you get to actually build strength. If you can say, I was wrong about believing in Al Gore and CO2 moving the climate needle, basically. Right. I was wrong about that when I audited the evidence. And I was wrong, for example, about believing that viral components ever caused a disease, because I actually have read virology papers at this point. And right. I realized that none of them actually show an isolated, purified element that was demonstrated on its own to cause actual illness in any human or animal or plant ever. And I was wrong to assume a lot of things so far. And I could be wrong about what I'm saying right now, because I have humility to say that. But medical freedom requires that you can actually flex that muscle and understand that if you trusted the wrong people, you're going to have a hard time, just like that South Park ski instructor would told you, basically. You're going to have a very bad time the older you get. Younger viewers to the show right now, you guys don't have health problems. I'm 51 now. I can tell you right now, if I don't do certain things, or if I do the wrong things, I feel the impact like I did not when I was 25, right? And I don't know the demographic of your show, but I'm sure probably pushing past 25, right?
I'm sure. So, yeah, right.
Yeah, and definitely guys, right? So you guys understand that the number 3 cause of your illness and death, the number 3 cause of death in America right now, look it up, is trusting a doctor with a drug or surgery, and they followed all the rules that they were taught. This is not malpractice. This is them just literally dishing out what they were taught to do, and you're a statistic, you're dead. That's the number 3 cause of death. But I'm going to say this, the number 1 and 2 cause of death is also doctor caused, because the number 1 is allegedly heart disease, okay? And then how they diagnose heart disease, meaning the methodology that they use, and how they treat heart disease with those certain medicines and drugs also causes death. So I would say you're better off literally if you just didn't get diagnosed. And the number two is cancer. And how they diagnose and especially how they treat cancer is a huge cause of death, because there you have the three ways of treating cancer. If you go to a white coat MD doctor, you know what those three ways are, right, William?
Well, I'm sure one's chemotherapy, one's probably radiation.
Yeah. And then of course surgery,
Right.
that's so you almost got him, but that's
Yeah.
great. It's pretty good for a non-medical guy. So, or actually, everyone's a medical guy once you get to a certain age, because now like we were talking off the show, we have to deal with things,
Right.
because we have real, growing older means, having impact of the 20th century, 21st century toxins that are around us. So medical freedom means that you have the choice of not just like the awareness of what you can do, but that's also awareness of options. That means that you know how to look people up, right?
Right.
And if you trusted the wrong people, you're really, you're very much in danger of your health if you trust the wrong people with your children to say, well, these vaccinations that my kids have, it's there to prevent disease. Well, you're making an assumption if you say that. You didn't read the papers on that. You didn't
It's
really
for the
look
greater good, though, Darrell. Come on, it's all about the greater good. This is something I'm actually talking about. I'm talking about later this week. I'm doing a presentation, and I'm tired of hearing the greater good. I think the greater good is one of the biggest leaders of, or biggest causes of loss of freedom in our country, because they all say, well, it's for the greater good. Vaccines, it's for the greater good. Crime cameras, it's for the greater good. Forget that we're losing freedoms and all of these things. And the greater good often means that it gives people that are greater than us more control over us. I do want to say one thing, going backwards again real quick, because you get on some good rolls, and I don't want to stop you. But before I forget, you talked about how people would rather die than admit they thought the wrong thing or believed the wrong thing. I always say that people would rather believe a soft little lie than a big hard truth. It's easier for them to swallow that little lie than it is sometimes be slapped in the face with the hard truth. And so it's easier, and that's why I think it's easier to lead people down the road of misinformation or down the road to losing their freedoms, because they're being tantalized into thinking that, hey, look, it's just this little lie. Now, they're not being told it's a little lie, but they're being fed this little bit of information that impacts them in a bigger way, that they give up their freedoms because it's harder for them to actually embrace and digest that big, hard truth.
Here's a big, hard truth. Like, imagine how expensive it is if you've spent a lot of your life voting and believing if you just vote the right person into government, you're going to have a good time. And then all of a sudden you hit someone like me who's going to bring up the ethical question. So is it ethical, William, for me to tell you what you can do with your property?
No.
Okay. So then can I give that power, which I don't even have, and it's not ethical in the first place, to someone else by saying, you know what? I'm moving to your town and I'm voting to have them put another person in and push a ballot initiative forward that would prevent you from renting out an extra room or your extra house. That I'm just basically, because I don't want to be gentrifying your neighborhood. I want to have more options for the poor people to. So I'm basically going to step up and I'm going to try to promote limits on what you do with your property. Is that ethical?
I don't think so.
Right. So then how is me voting in any way ethical, period?
Well, I would disagree with you a little bit, because I think that voting, I believe me, I get you. Our vote has lost a lot of power in the last 100 years.
That's the question, William.
What's that?
How is it ethical for me in any way to try to step into that arena? Basically, consider that we negotiate things voluntarily, you and I. This show, what are we going to talk about? How long is the show going to go? Like that. Who owns the show? You do. And look, we negotiated all of that before the show, and we figured it out, and there was no force involved. But the government is making laws that are forced upon you and me and everyone else. that's about force. That's like the gun in the room. So how is it ethical for me to grab the gun and say, you know what, I'm going to use this gun in a good way, William? You want me for president. You want me to tell everyone what they can and can't do. And you see the ethical problem right there. Like, meaning no matter how well-intentioned I am, I might sound like I'm clever, right? I can put a couple words together coherently,
Right.
right?
Right.
But is it really actually okay in an ethical, moral way? And so there is an ethical base that a lot of us people were used to. That people who like learned about Ayn Rand, for example, they studied objectivism. First, they'd have to learn about metaphysics, meaning like the nature of this universe in general. They had to learn about epistemology, about what is knowledge and how do you verify knowledge, which is called research and evidence. They had to learn about
Critical thinking.
aesthetics. They had to learn about the aesthetics of things, meaning like why are things pleasing and not pleasing. They had to learn about ethics, what is ethical, and then from there, the final step after that, the last one, William, that's called politics, meaning of the polity, and like what is ethical for a community. So the only people in a community who could ever decide what is ethical are those people in the community. But the reality is, the ultimate minority is the individual. And if you're against actual minority, like if you're against the individual choosing for themselves what they can and can't own and do with their property, you're against the minority, the ultimate minority, which is the individual. So I'm just saying, it just, for me, as I had to come through all this, if I want to be consistent and not a hypocrite, I'm not going to vote, because I'm not going to be part of that. I'm going to do other things, and that we could cover in the show, that will increase my own and others' freedom. There's other ways of doing it besides grabbing the gun in the room or reaching for it, rather, because the real people who have that gun, they have a lot more money than you and me. You know what I mean?
And so Darrell, tell me, what are some of those other ways? Can we give those in concise answers, or do we bring it out later?
No, I mean, it's very simple. You first, before you ever consider that you're going to clean up your whole local region or your whole country, you have to say, like, well, you're cleaning up your own household physically, like financially
Right.
speaking, like your family, your own health, your health, your wife's health, like everyone's, like everything like that, like the financial health, the physical health. Are you making enough of your own food? Start doing that. Are you actually in network with the people around you? Do you know your neighbors? Do you actually know them? Are you there? Do you have a communication method so that if they're in trouble, you can, sync up with them and help them? Are you well armed? Are you able to defend yourself? Now you can come to the aid of others. Like, instead of just being helpless. And when seconds count, the police are only hours away, as they are over here. That's ridiculous, counting on the wrong people. You can, take financial, like, foresight. Every time this happens, this type of disaster, like we get to see each 80 years, because 80 years ago it was 1943. That was a disaster, William. That was, I mean, for many people, meaning
Right.
people dying in an unnecessary war over and over again, like just being sent out as cannon fodder. That's a disaster. People being put into concentration camps. That was a disaster. But in disaster times like that, millions are made by people who take opportunity. Nowadays, there's this technology that just happens to be one investment that you can look into. I'm talking, of course, about Bitcoin and the rest of the cryptocurrencies. You can access them, and no one can stop you. So it used to be, you've heard of like a Swiss bank account?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
we're gonna talk. Yeah, we're gonna have to talk some more about that too, because
yeah.
I don't know that I'm actually. I understand the whole Bitcoin concept, and I understand the privacy that comes along with it. But what I don't agree with is I worry that it's a step in the direction of digital currency, that the federal government would initiate some form of digital currency, that we switch to become a cashless society, which I think would be the death of America. If they switch to a cashless society whereby, now if you don't have checks or have cash anymore, it's all a digital currency, I think is the beginning of the end of freedom in our country.
And we already have the movements in that direction. I mean, you can certainly look at the WeChat system in China and understand, like, compare that. But I mean, like, if you're going to talk about a technology, really understand it. what a distributed network such as the Bitcoin is separate from the type of thing like WeChat is, and like what the CBDC, the central bank digital currency that is desired and planned. They are two different animals, because like decentralized is the main thing right there. You can't stop me from sending you Bitcoin. No one right now can, and vice versa. No one can stop you from sending some Bitcoin to me right now. Period. No one can stop that. But anything that's related to WeChat over in China, or a central bank digital currency upcoming, or even our bank accounts right now, William, or like PayPal or Venmo or Cash App, etc., those companies can stop a transaction because they are not decentralized. They are not distributed. They are very centralized. There is a very
Right.
central point of control for them. So it's like talking about two different animals. And I'm not saying to replace things of tangible, simple value like gold, silver, precious metals, etc., like real estate, and like the actual commodities that will be soon invented, like other tangibles that we're going to trade with, basically. I mean, like that's a very tangible thing, but the difference is I can't send you my silver without spending in some way. But no one can stop me from sending a cryptocurrencies, most of them, and especially the Bitcoin. No one can stop it. So I had a friend recently, who went through divorce, and the judge banged the gavel down and said, basically, all of your accounts are frozen until I figure this stuff out. So for a long time, all that money that he thought was his, well, guess what? It wasn't his anymore, William. But
Right.
had he converted a bunch of it over into Bitcoin first, no judge's gavel, no one can stop it. And that's, like I said before, in moments of crisis, this is an opportunity. And I've been speaking about this for the last, I don't know, 8 months plus. Like they say, hey, guess what? Guess what? It is the beginning of the bull market. And now people are starting to see that the Bitcoin is moving in that general direction. Caution. Obviously, this is not financial advice from a financial advisor. This is just basically an acupuncturist who has an opinion on the topic. And
So,
that's that's what this is.
so you think that cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, is another form of freedom for humans, not just Americans, but for all humans, as a way to be able to exercise their freedom without government intervention?
I'm seeing evidence of it has happened for the last, since January 9th of 2009. Okay, since then it's been released, and there's a big portion of people in the world called the unbanked. Have you heard of them?
I
The
have.
unbanked. Yeah. So that we're talking about, like, parts of Africa, South America, like, basically Far East Asia, these people, well, most of all of Asia, basically, they just don't have the ability to go to a bank because they have a totalitarian government that makes it harsh or impossible for them to afford ID and to afford to do real banking. But what can they do? What have they been doing for the last 10 plus years now? They have been using crypto, especially Bitcoin, and they've been able to open a wallet up, keep that 12-word seed code in their head. So when some bully or warlord steals their phone, they could be like, show them a fake little amount when their real amount is saved, and they could save wealth. This has been the lowest amount of poverty in the history of the world, William. This right now is the lowest amount. Obviously, it dipped a bit, like thanks to World War COVID, but like there was more prosperity during the Trump years, for example, is what I'm saying. But this is the least amount. And part of that is worldwide due to people having access to accounts that you can't stop or close, that people
Wow. This
can
is
do that.
well.
You can't stop it. You can't
I
stop it.
I can already see that we're going to go. I mean, we're going to have a nice long show today. We're not even. I almost feel like we're just getting started, and we're going to go back to digital currency later. But I want to jump back again. I keep jumping back to the medical freedom because I think it needs to be talked about a little bit more. One of the things that I'm seeing with medical freedom that we're not that's being taken from us is that before Obamacare, there were more health organizations or more health insurance companies. Now, whether you're in the system or not in the system, or, so I'm speaking more to the average person who's, they have their insurance policy, they've got their insurance company, they go to the doctors, that's how they get their health care their health treated, we'll say. Now, we're seeing in the last bunch of years, we're seeing less health insurance companies. So we're seeing less choices. We're seeing more times where you go to the doctor, this is covered, that's not covered. You've got this problem, but that's not covered. At the end of the day, you get this great big huge bill that you got to pay because the doctor says you have to have it, but then the insurance company says, okay, it's not covered. And so we're seeing less medical freedom, I think, because of that. And we're seeing more people make choices like you have, where you say, okay, what can I do to take my medical freedom back into my own hands and be able to exercise my own medical freedom to take care of myself, either outside the system or in partnership with a regular system? Your answer to that?
What do you have options out there? So first off, the usual kind of thing like, oh my God, I need to fix my house. What am I going to do? I need to fix my car. What am I going to do? Well, you can become a mechanic. You can become really skilled carpenter. That's kind of what I chose with I have health problems. I had health problems when I was 20. So I basically learned that guess what? I better become a healthcare professional because it's the number one most important thing. My house can break, my car can break, but I don't do much of anything if I'm broken. So I needed to do that. And that's the choice that I went. But guess what? That takes a long time. So you need to find other options. And if you think that your insurance company should or will pay for real professionals who get the real job done, I think that you're dreaming. I think that it's the same kind of thing. Like, did you put aside money to fix your house because you own a house? That's what you do. Did you put aside money to fix your car? That's what you do. And you put aside money to fix your body because you're going to pay real professionals that. But the dependent way of thinking, the thinking like a little child who deserves to have someone come in to pay, basically to go to a doctor's office and that the insurance covers it and you don't pay a damn thing for that, as if, right? This is the type of childish entitlement thinking that I'm going to speak out against. Real healthcare professionals who get the real job done. You can find them. Like here, I'm going to even give away my secrets that I often will say on my own show. I've got a show, Not Medical Advice, where I can speak all the things that are not relevant to my clients because it doesn't help their specific healthcare conditions, right? But so I can go on Not Medical Advice and I can say all the things like this. Okay, so what you guys can do, like I'll just put it out, the ICAK, International College of Applied Kinesiology, ICAK.com, find a doctor, and you can go there and like put in your zip code, and you can find a real professional who will measure the real impacts of any medicine or food or treatment on you. And they are skilled at finding and solving chronic illnesses and injuries in a way that your medical doctor will not do. And they are not going to usually take your insurance. So you can just put that aside there. You're going to pay real money to solve a real problem. That's what you do. Grow up, get ready to pay real money, and stop thinking like a child who thinks that their insurance should cover it. Like my government should protect me. Like, like my vote should count. This is nonsense. Grow up, like start with that.
Look, I'm loving what you're saying. I'm loving everything you're saying. And what's interesting is, and I'll tell you, like I've told other people, is, I don't have to agree with you 100%. My listeners don't have to agree with you 100%. But when you can listen to somebody objectively, like I listen to you and go, you know what? I'm grabbing a lot. I'm agreeing with a lot of what you're saying, and I'm grabbing it. Okay. There's some things that I don't agree with, but that's where we use our critical thinking skills to be able to objectively go to tailor it to fit our needs. And when you're able to do that as a human, you're taking responsibility for yourself. You're taking responsibility for your family. You learn to take responsibility for your community, and you begin to learn how to fix problems instead of jumping on the narrative or the ideological bandwagon instead and just spouting off the ideological stuff that doesn't fix anything. And you really get into the nuts and bolts of how to operate responsibly in society. It's almost like Dave Ramsey's financial advice for every aspect of your life instead. Is that a good way of saying it there, Darrell?
I like the analogy, and I haven't looked enough into what Dave Ramsey espouses, but like all I can say is that there's a lot of options that, though I sound, because you can say, like we said before, I'm coming from, like, I grew up in New York. This is a New York accent. I've calmed it down a bit since moving to Hawaii. That's a little bit more. I have strengthened my humility muscle. I could be wrong about things. Like come back in a year, I'm going to probably say, okay, maybe I could have been wrong about this and that kind of conclusion that I said, right? And I'm good with that because I've been wrong about at least 30 major topics so far, having become an adult and realizing, flexing the humility skill. But there's so many options out there. That's the first step, is just to believe and to keep in mind that, have you heard of the Kybalion, the 7 Hermetic Principles? Because
No.
there's people in your audience, they have heard of the Kybalion and the 7 Hermetic Principles. And the first one is about the principle of the mind and what you think about all the time, what you focus on, the media, the news that you take in. You're creating your own reality. And there's going to be more and more people who create the reality of health and wealth and prosperity. And more people are going to be stepping away from the totalitarian aspects of what's going on, So that's why when I was mentioning, hey, there are technologies of investment, and I'm going to certainly promote the Bitcoin, because you can learn charting, learn how, like, all the charts, learn how basically the S&P 500 transportation index affects all of the S&P, affects all investments. Those are, hundreds of trillions of dollars in movement and momentum, and that changes everything. All markets are manipulated, including Bitcoin. And
I'm,
so
I'm
why not
taking
ride
I'm
the
taking
wave?
I'm taking a note. Okay.
Ride the wave, and you don't have to throw everything in right away, meaning like that the dollar cost average, all, like, you just download anything like Coinbase if you live in civilized places, and if you're here in Hawaii, the Cash App. And you can certainly purchase, I do like a $40 of Bitcoin per Saturday, and that just like consistently adds to, obviously I throw down large when I want to, but just little bits at a time, and you're going to win if you can hold that strategy of, in this instance, 2 to 5 years. And
So
all I needed to do, that's
I
all you
want
need to
you
do,
to
is just hold it.
so creating your reality is one of the first step of the 7 principles of what?
If you look at the book called the Kybalion, the 7 Hermetic Principles, like Hermes Trismegistus. I'm trying to, let me enunciate there. So they're basically the emerald tablets of Thoth, and they were all of these ideas that were promoted in antiquity. There are 7 of them in the Kybalion, but there's many more actually. That was just artificially truncated to 7 because it makes it easier for, you know, the ancients, tried to simplify things for the common man, and then obviously they had the elite or esoteric versions. There are all these principles of, hey, reality works this way. One of my favorite marketers, Nathan Frazier, promotes this type of magic, essentially, that what your thought and what your focus is on will create your reality. That's one component of it. And there's a lot of opportunity in that, that, like, here you came on the like, you're watching the show, you're watching like, oh God, I gotta get back to William Wallace. This stuff is great. And you're here, and now you're hearing my words, and now you're looking up the Kybalion, and now you can listen to the whole book, and you can get the idea of it, and you can get the general principles of it. Now
I
you're
had
changing
I had
your
a
life.
guy last week talk about the Hegelian dialectic.
Oh yes, the Hegelian dialectic, problem, reaction, solution, right?
Yeah.
And that's like a way of just being, using your critical thinking skills. Again, if you have critical thinking, that means you have a method. And if I said, hey, William, are you a critical thinker?
Yeah.
And then I say, okay, so tell me your method in 3 sentences, quick.
I'm
Your
just
method of critical thinking.
I've never really thought of it like that. I'm just very I'm very I'm a very inquisitive person. So when I
Okay,
do critical
that's
thinking,
different then, right?
what's
See,
that?
if I said, are you a contractor, carpenter, or carpenter? Yeah, I'd be like, okay, tell me your method of doing, like, building a house, and you would lay out the steps of site
Okay.
assessment, of foundation, of
Right.
building, like that. Okay, so when I teach critical thinking with people, I lay out the steps, and the steps are very ancient. You can look up the trivium method of critical thinking, trivium, like where you get the word trivial from, which did not, it meant the base knowledge to begin the study of mastery, to begin the practice towards
Mhm.
mastery. That's what trivial meant back in the day. They turned it into a, like, inconsequential, out of sequence knowledge to prove that you're a smarty pants at a party. That was a modern kind of definition, right? But the real definition of the trivium, like, was to understand that you start with knowledge, you asking who, what, where, when questions. That's your general grammar, like, everything having to do with how do you
Right.
make a show? How do you get on StreamYard? How much does it like all these like grammar questions? And then you have logic. How do you make a good show? You have obviously better lighting than I do, William, like that kind of thing. You have better background, you do it that way. I'm kind of, like still learning this kind of stuff, right? You have how you
I
have,
have
understanding
I
why,
have strong points, I have weak points. So
right? So do I. Yeah. So
one of
like
my weak
you,
points you might be able to help me with content safe, but we're gonna talk about that later.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm coming to gotta say, like, I got about 8 minutes before my next appearance, but here's
Okay.
the deal: like, you have like, you can do your knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. You can have your who, what, where, and when questions that you are researching and getting like the data points. You're connecting the dots of the data, and that's called logic. That means you know your logical fallacies, like the appeal to authority or appeal to tradition. You know what you've heard of the informal logical fallacies like that, like ad hominem.
No,
That
ha
that
well, I've probably
you know,
heard of it, but not in that way.
yeah. So there, you learn what is an informal logical fallacy. Those are
Right.
like a virus scanner for your mind, so that you're not fooled by saying, everyone's putting a mask on, so you should too, or everyone's getting this injection, so you should too, right? And that's the appeal to popularity or appeal to authority, and that's a problem. And then you go to the final aspect, which is classical rhetoric or wisdom, the practical applications of your knowledge and understanding. It produces a predictable, desirable result. That's practical, that's wisdom, and that's the method of critical thinking that I teach.
So let me ask you a few questions. You say you teach this. Do you teach
Yeah.
this on your platform Content Safe, or do you teach this on your show?
On my show, not medical advice, but yeah, as far as our company, Content Safe, we're here to work for you, William, and all the other shows to get your message out. We're here to basically help you flex your power to help more people with your message to grow your audience. And if you're growing your audience, that means that you're solving problems for people. That means you're making money, you're monetized.
And you're teaching this to clients. You said this information.
Yeah,
Is-
I do. Because I mean, I have people showing up in my healthcare clinic and they have problems. And their problems were caused by a lack of critical thinking and a lack of emotional balancing skills. The other thing that I would teach them.
I love
And
it. A couple more
yeah,
quick questions. Is if you have to get off pretty soon here.
yeah.
I'll try to keep you on longer, but you gotta get going. So, and I'm gonna respect that, but I'm gonna ask you a couple questions off air too. So let's bring this back to freedom and liberty. We've talked about a lot of different topics. We've talked about a lot of different ways of thinking and things that people can do and maybe what they should be doing. How do we connect that back to freedom for the individual person? How do we connect that back to being used to be able to help save freedom in our country? How do we use that to be able to improve things, in our own communities?
All right. So first off, you do have a community, but you don't have a country. Because if you have something, you have control over it, and you don't have control over that. That whole thing is much bigger than anyone can flex their muscles around and ever change or create. But you do have the traditions of neighborliness, and you have like the ability to take care of yourself and your family and connect, like I said, to your neighbors. You can look up freedomcells.org. That's a website where you can find like-minded freedom associated people in your neighborhood and connect with them. That's one way that you can do that. And you could find that there are local people who appreciate freedom right around you right now,
Right.
and they walk their talk, and you could do business with them. You could be buying eggs and chickens from them. You could be seriously trading vegetables with them. You can be in connection. You guys, people can actually sync up their security systems. Did you know that, William? You can
I
actually
do.
sync up so that you have the ability to understand, when their alarm goes off, you're alerted as well as them, and they're away, or they might be there, and you say, hey, Bill, are you okay? Because I have like my alert went off at your house and you don't answer. I could consider driving over and checking on you, right? But that's just, there are like many ways. It starts with the principles of stoicism. Like first you fix yourself. You're going to clean your own room, and then you're going outwards in spheres of influence and spheres of control. Like you have to like move outwards, not like from the outwards in. Like that's
So
not going to work.
you're
Basically,
touching base on something. So we have a lot of parallels, Darrell, that we didn't know, and that we're gonna build on later and do some later shows together if you're so inclined and interested. Okay. that when I first started my radio show, I wanted to be the next right-wing conservative talk show host. My guests, my listeners have heard this story a bunch of times. And I went on the air talking just right-wing narrative ideological stuff that I adhere to. And I got tired of it after a bunch of years because I felt like I was just repeating narratives, ideologies. I was doing nothing different than what the left was doing or what the establishment-minded people were doing. I ran for office. I knocked on every single door, and I realized that we're all more alike than we all realize when it comes to freedom and liberty. And the best way to fix our country, I do think we still have one. It needs a lot of work and it needs a lot of protecting and saving. But the best way to do that is to start in our own communities and find things that we can agree on with each other. I don't care what freedoms and liberties other people choose. I don't care if I don't agree with them on a lot of things. I care about what we can agree on. And those are the things that we can work on together and fix. And when you start building those blocks together, to your point, you fix a community, you save a community, you bring more people together, you actually build people up instead of tearing down what ends up being happening to our country right now. And that's my thought. Any final words there, Darrell, before we ask everybody to listen to the replay on Rumble and not YouTube, but Rumble and my podcast?
Yeah, I wanted to say, if you like what my messages were, you can for sure be checking out my individual shows on Not Medical Advice. It's over on Spotify and iTunes, etc. But further than that, we want to get William and many other shows up on Content Safe and distributed. So you can go to contentsafe.co. You can say, hey, I got a show to recommend to you. And if you are one of those producers, because I know you saw me on another show,
Right.
where like you're getting to see me do the circuit. And if you're saying like, hey, I need to get my show up on more places, we deal with that. We deal with monetization, like to say, hey, how are you making money for your show? And we'll talk about that off air too, because if you're making money, you're solving problems. That's the main deal. And like, we want to know, how do you actually do that? Because if you're making money, if you're solving problems for your audience, that means you can afford us. Because we're not doing this as a charity. We're helping you get up on more, we're helping you grow your audience in trade to help us grow Content Safe. So please go to contentsafe.co, and I'm hoping to be on your show sometime soon.
Darrell, you will be. Thank you so much. Hang in there for 1 minute. Everybody else, please share not only the show, but we'll get the podcast. This podcast or the audio from this will be on the podcast app, on all podcast apps. Find the video on Rumble. Please share it with somebody. And I want you to know that I'd be grateful if you did, because not only do I respect your time, I respect my guest time, I respect their information, and I think it's worthy of sharing. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great day.